I'm Tom Burke, and you're listening to the 365Flicks podcast.
Hi, this is Dave Prowse. You're listening to 365Flicks podcast.
It's Tim Merritt, and you are listening to 365Flicks podcast. So pay attention.
The definitive 365.
Well, that's a real question, isn't it? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public. Oswald, Ruby, Cuba, the mafia. Keeps them guessing like some kind of parlor game. Prevents them from asking the most important question, why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up?
If I answer that question you keep asking, if I give you the name of the big enchilada, you know, then it's Bon Voyage Dino.
I can't believe they killed him because he wanted to change things in our time.
We almost had Castro with us, then we tried to whack him. Everybody's flipping sides all the time. Funny games, man, funny games. The agency too, man. CIA and the Mafia working together, trying to whack out the beard. Mutual interest, they've been doing it for years. It's the weirdest thing you could dream. But who the fuck pulls whose chain? Who the fuck knows?
You don't know shit cause you never been fucked in the ass.
Back and to the left. Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
Hello and welcome to episode 23 of the 365Flicks podcast. We're back again.
Yeah. Only just
even
recorded,
quicker than last time and everything. We only just recorded a few nights ago, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
So, we're back again, and tonight it's part 2 of the famous JFK spectacular episode. So once again, we are joined by Doug Campbell and Martin Rigby.
Hello.
How are you guys doing tonight?
All ready and good.
Excellent.
I'm absolutely swell, fellas. How you guys doing?
Good, man. Good. Yeah, I've been looking forward to getting this episode done.
Yeah, we're kind of riding high just now off the last episode and the last weekend that we had. So we thought, let's get this in, let's get this done, and let's just keep the momentum moving.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Well, we loved part 1. We loved recording part 1.
Enjoyed doing that. I really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, I mean, even listening back to the episode after Kev put it live, I couldn't remember a thing that we'd said in it, so so it was cool to listen back to it as well. And we had a lot of feedback from that episode. We had a lot of interested people in that. It's so clearly, it's not just us that's interested in it. There are a lot of people out there looking for the truth.
Like I said, as soon as you dip your fingers in, that's it, really. You hooked.
Exactly, yeah.
I was a tad disappointed, though, that I never got any, emails, saying shut it down or anything. I was kind of thinking we would be taken offline.
Do you think these people would ask? They would just do it?
Yeah, I think they
you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. You'd be putting the boot of the car, and that'd be it, I think.
No emails off BT or anything. No emails off the big guys.
I don't think they work through BT.
You never know, Martin. You never know.
Yeah, but listen for the funny little clicks on your telephone from now on.
He's not lying. He's not lying.
That's not happened to you, has it, Doug?
No, that's a real deal.
Holy shit. Anyway, so it got dark there.
just for a second. I thought being put into black bags and then thrown in the car was bad enough, but now I'm listening for clicks.
Yeah, aye. The whole way through the episode now we're going to be listening for clicks. So as we all know, the last episode we were speaking about the movie JFK and how we were speaking to you guys about how realistic the movie is. We didn't get too far into the movie JFK, to be honest.
Did we actually talk about the movie?
I think we got about half an hour into the movie, but we won't quibble. But before we do that, we'll just give a little bit of shout out to the guys on the networks who are kind enough to host us. So you can find the 365Flicks podcast on Musings of a Geek. You can find us on the Wicked Radio Network, Tangible Network, Geeky
Antics Network Global.
Every time.
We Be Geeks, nerdly.co.uk. And a quick little shout out to our friend Nickel. Yeah, we might be on a few networks, but so's The Simpsons.
There you go. Yeah. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Stitcher, and you can find us on any of the third-party apps out there. Just search for the 365 Flicks podcast.
And while you're on there, if you want to have a little search for the other man on the other side of the conversation, Doug, you want to give the Dallas Action a little shout out, mate?
Sure, man. Sure. You can find us on the hosting site is Spreaker.com. The podcast is called The Dallas Action. It's strictly deep politics, JFK assassination research. We're on Spreaker. I'm also on Facebook, have a Facebook page, and we have another one called the JFK Assassination 20 November Network page, and you can go to anybody wants to get the archives, the posts for the shows can go to 22 November Network, all one word, .wordpress.com, and you can find all the links to all the shows there.
I've been on that website. It's really interesting.
But you're also a fellow T-boner as well. You're on the Tangent Bone Network as well.
Yes, I am. Tangent Bone and Wicked Radio. We, I think, I don't know if they picked our little show up before or after I was on your thing. It was actually because of you guys.
Oh, really? That's
365 Flicks. I noticed you guys were on Wicked Radio, so I went over and submitted my little thing to them, and is it Devin over there? I think, yeah Devin. Yeah. He jumped right on it, man. Picked us right up.
Awesome.
Oh, that's cool. That's always nice to hear. That's what we're all about.
And thank you, Devin, for that.
Martin, you wanna plug your Facebooks and anything you got to you like to plug?
It's just the one group, which is JFK Uncensored, which of course Doug is admin of as well, and it covers all things JFK assassination and all things that aren't insane theories. We try and go for the ground level theories. We are a pro-conspiracy site, of course, but anyone's welcome to that site as long as they can show a bit of decorum and respect.
Yeah, you do have quite a, I was going to say strict, but it's not that strict. It's just like you say, just keep it respectful, keep it real.
Yeah, so keep the tinfoil hat stuff out.
Exactly, and it's so easy in these groups not for it to turn into sort of like a dirt flinging fest, and it get quite personal quite quickly. But I think we keep a good control on that, and over time that's kind of supported itself. So people kind of know that when they're on that site, that they can say, they can get a decent answer and a decent debate going without having to resort to anything personal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've noticed that myself because I do check up on it every now and then. Every couple of days, I have a little look on the page, and you are keeping on top of that really well.
Yeah, especially, and of course Doug is as well. If you if there's a swear word dropped, then you'll guarantee Doug will be on your ass very quickly.
I'm like anybody else, man. I use colorful language every day, damn near every sentence. But there's a couple. One in particular, it's an online JFK assassination research forum. And there's no information there. It's basically people sniping back and forth at one another, calling each other names and this and that, and nothing productive gets done. And, like Martin said, show some decorum, show some respect. It's not a bar room. It's not your living room. It's not a pub. And, just be a grown-up.
I think that's what we're trying to instill on the 365 Flicks podcast, but we just can't help ourselves.
It's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I think most of that comes out in the editing.
Well, that's the advantage of editing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Post-production's just amazing.
I was going to say, I know the production's great because the last episode, the part one we did of this, the intro, you guys did a fantastic job on the intro, editing that together. I thought that was, using the dialogue from the movie. That was really cool. Good job.
Thank you, man. That was all Kev. That was nothing to do with me. That was all Kev.
That was a good job.
That was just me kind of tinkering.
Kev, you rocked, buddy.
I like to tinker. I did actually have a full, I think it was about 8 or 9 minutes, and then I thought that's just too long for an intro.
It's quite a long intro.
Yeah, it's a long intro, yeah.
But to be fair, there's that much you can pull that much from that movie that it was hard. But yeah, I had fun making it. I like making little stuff like that.
It was very cool.
Yeah. So the last time we did this, we basically ended on the bombshell of Chris saying, So let's talk.
Let's talk about talk about Lee Harvey Oswald. So, so we're going to go back into the movie now. So JFK, released in 1991, directed and written by Oliver Stone, starring Kevin Costner, Tommy Lee Jones, Kevin Bacon, Gary Oldman, Joe Pesci. You know, there's loads of them in there. The way we left it on the last episode was, let's talk about Lee Harvey Oswald. So where do you start with Lee Harvey Oswald then?
I'll let Martin pick where to start. Okay, where do you start with the guy? He was decidedly not what he was painted to be by the Warren Commission, by the government, by the media. A malcontent communist / Marxist loser. That's a little bit maybe. I don't know. The guy's an enigma. I mean, we know so much about him, but nothing. It's really hard to it's hard to put into words. I don't know, Martin. Where do you start with Oswald? Other than I don't know. He's an enigma for sure.
He certainly is an enigma. I think if you as a newbie, you probably, as someone that's new to the assassination, you're always going to start at the point of the. I mean, this is a whole other show, but dare I say it? But no, I mean, you're going to start at the point of the ballistics and the forensic evidence according to the authorities. That's where you're going to start, and then from that point onwards, from the palm print on the rifle, the fingerprints, etc., where he was in the TSB, the Texas School Repository, then that leads to a whole heap of other connections, and it's just where do you get off and where do you jump in? That's what I'd say. Yeah,
that's a very good point. That's a very good point. I mean, really, the first time we're introduced to him, I think in the movie is, there's flashbacks all over the place and that kind of thing. So the first time that we're really introduced to him, they're talking about Lee Harvey Oswald handing out the Fair Play for Cuba leaflets.
Yeah.
So we're told that the address on the leaflets was the 544 Camp Street.
Bannister's offices. Yeah.
And then just around the corner was Bannister's office, which was 531 Lafayette Street. So obviously there was a connection. There was a connection there. So I mean, what do we know about the connection between Lee Harvey Oswald and Guy Bannister?
You have that whole scene, don't you, when he's kind of like, look over there, what do you see? Look over there, what do you see? Look over there, what do you see? Is that kind of the bit you're talking about?
Yeah.
And it's all the different branches of kind of security and.
Yes, that's where they have the flashback about that. I think. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously we don't really know a great deal about what's all there. I mean, how close to the movie is the truth?
When you say close to the truth, I mean, you're looking at, I think he's basically obviously basing that film on Garrison's trials, and there are elements and parts of truth peppered throughout the movie, and I think you could take each scene, perhaps not to sort of shy away from it, but you could take each scene and then take that as one element and go off down the road with that part of the truth. I mean, as far as Bannister and Shaw, which is obviously the main culprit in that film, there is so much evidence. Well, there's so much witness testimony that perhaps wasn't used, evidence that we probably won't see again, that connects Oswald to Shaw and connects him to Bannister, or connects Shaw to Bannister and them to Oswald. I mean, so there is truth in the movie, but it's just how far you want to go into it. Do you know what I mean, Doug?
Yeah. I think the consensus nowadays, I think what we know was going on. People, I think in the movie Garrison, or in the movie, but certainly in his case, Garrison made the assumption that passing out the Fair Play for Cuba leaflets, him getting on the radio for the interview, him getting on the TV show, him getting on TV, in the aftermath of the fight he had with I believe it was Katja Smith, was part of sheep dipping or part of setting him up. I think now what we know with declassified documents, what we know with various operations that were going on at the time, that what you had was Oswald being used as a dangle, an intelligence dangle. It's like a fishing lure. What Bannister and those guys were doing, they weren't necessarily trying to bolster, in my opinion, they weren't necessarily trying to bolster and prop up, you know, his reputation as a communist or as a Castro sympathizer. What the dangle up, Bannister was famous. I say maybe infamous for, you know, recruiting people to infiltrate leftist organizations on college campuses, for instance. You know, trying to infiltrate, you know, pro-communist, pro-left-leaning, anti-segregationist organizations. And the dangle op is basically using him like a fishing lure, like I say. Basically, what would go down is you put Oswald on the street corner handing out these leaflets, and it says things like, you know, free lectures, free literature, hands off Cuba, for copies of the literature or whatever to join this address, you know, send a postcard in, send a letter in, and anyone that would maybe contact this office, you know, wanting to join the Fair Play for Cuba Committee or expressing interest in any of this pro-Castro literature or these phantom lectures that never happened, they would immediately go on a watch list for Bannister. He was known to have reams and reams of files on, you know, suspected subversives or leftists or suspected communists. And that's basically what they were doing. They were hanging him out as a dangle. That whole thing obviously played a big part in painting that picture of him in the media and in the official record as being a pro-Castro communist. But I don't believe so. When we look back, who the guy was hanging out with, who his friends were. Now that we, you know, in hindsight, with all we know now, it's like a friend of mine, a researcher named Paul Trejo, says, you know, his outward image, his facade was that of a Marxist, of that a Castro sympathizer, a leftist. When you look at his known associations outside of that, the guy was probably a confirmed rightist.
Yeah, you touched on that in one of your episodes, didn't you, Doug? I think you said, didn't Lee Harvey Oswald apparently or allegedly try to assassinate a governor or something like that a couple of years before Kennedy? He was completely on the opposite side of the fence from Kennedy. Was it General Walker?
It's actually a guy named ex-General Walker. It happened on April 10th of 1963. Walker, there's a lot of credible evidence and a lot of ties. Number one, Walker knew Bannister well. General Walker was pretty famous in his day. He was the only United States general, and so far he's the only United States general to resign his commission in the 20th century. He was a violent anti-communist. He actually got sort of drummed out of his command. He was the commander of the largest NATO infantry division in Europe, in Munich, Germany, and got caught by the Kennedys. He was violating something called the Smith Act. He was indoctrinating his troops with hard, ultra-right-wing propaganda. And the Kennedys busted him down. They took his command away from him. And as a result, he resigned, claiming that the Kennedys were basically communists, that they were setting the country up, that they were selling the country out to the Soviets. And he kind of became a poster child for the anti-segregationist, hard right in the South. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the James Meredith thing, the University of Mississippi. In 1962, they were, Kennedy pretty much ordered the University of Mississippi to let this black kid named James Meredith enroll. Well, Walker sends a call out to basically the entire right in the country and leads a riot. He leads a riot. There were people hurt. There were National Guardsmen injured. It was a big mess. Over 3,000 people on the campus rioting. Bobby Kennedy has him arrested. They put him on a plane in shackles and ship him to a military. This is after he's resigned from the Army. They ship him to a military psychiatric hospital. Of course, it didn't stick. He was released, and so he had plenty of plenty of motive to hate the Kennedys. Well,
sure, yeah.
He's on this nationwide speaking tour with a segregationist, just a right-wing, hateful Southern Baptist, Bible-banging, fire and brimstone preacher named Billy James Hargis. And the night he gets back, somebody tries to kill him. They put a bullet through his window. It hits the wall above his desk. Barely misses his head. They have absolutely no suspects whatsoever until a few days after the assassination of John Kennedy. Suddenly they tie it to Oswald.
Yeah.
And Oswald, to this day, it's like you were saying, in this day and age, I don't know how familiar you are with, politics over here in the U.S., but it would be like somebody trying to pop Trump and Hillary. They're opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's a good point, because, why would anybody, if you've got political leanings where you would be as much of a nutter to do that, why would you pick one? And you know what I mean. So that is a very good point.
And also, it also says about Oswald. It again says something that runs, I think, throughout. Doug said earlier on about the Warren Commission, how they painted Oswald as this lone assassin and malcontent. If you look at apart from the Warren Commission, look at his life and who he was. It's such an ambiguous subject. You could pick up the Warren Commission and pick up their psychiatric reports of him and just take that and accept it. But then you could look at something else, which is, still looking at Oswald, still studying him, and it gives you a totally different picture. It's such an ambiguous thing. In his political leanings, in who he was, the official picture and who he actually was, they're always at odds, but so ambiguous.
Yeah.
Right. The one thing about, they every government agency under the sun claimed the same thing about Oswald. We didn't know anything about him. He was a loser. He was a loner. He was a malcontent. He was nobody. He was frustrated. He wanted to make his mark on history. Couldn't hold a job, this and that. We didn't know anything about him. Well, we know now that that's not true. That was a lie. Years and years before Kennedy was assassinated, by the time this guy was 20 years old, before he was 20 years old, we know now the State Department, the Office of Naval Intelligence, the FBI, the CIA, who else, Martin? The NSA. All of these government agencies had reams of files on Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
In November of 1960, 6 months before President Kennedy is inaugurated, right around the time of the presidential election, even the FBI, even Hoover, we didn't know anything about this guy. He was not a known entity. He was not a known threat. In November of 1960, J. Edgar Hoover himself sends a memo to the State Department, the United States Department of State. And in this memo, he's telling the State Department, we have run into a dead end in this matter you have asked us to investigate. Well, what was the matter that the State Department asked the FBI to investigate 6 months before Kennedy's inauguration? They had contacted the FBI sometime before that and asked the FBI to look into who was using this young man, Lee Harvey Oswald's ID and birth certificate in Western Europe, when we know for a fact that he's in the Soviet Union.
Huh. Wow.
So now, somebody was using his ID, his birth certificate, calling themselves Lee Oswald in Western Europe when everybody knew he was in the Soviet Union. And Hoover knew this as far back as November of 1960. And that's huge to me. He was a known quantity. He was a known he was a known figure. They knew of this guy. If we know now, I've heard from people who would know that, they talk about all the documents. I can't remember what the number is that they're supposed to have on Oswald. but I'm told that they have one file that's 9 4-drawer file cabinets on Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the last episode. I remember that.
And we still haven't seen any of that. To this very day, Lee Harvey Oswald's tax returns, his income tax returns, are classified top secret on the grounds of national security. We can't see them. Now, why in the world would the government not want anyone to see Lee Harvey Oswald's tax returns? What possible ramifications towards national security could that information have?
Yeah, that's...
Well,
especially
the only thing that's on those tax returns is who was paying him.
Yeah,
of course.
I suppose. Especially if it's somebody who, they said they didn't know, sort of thing. Why are they blocking all that? Is that the sort of thing that, how you've got all these files that, did they just get released, Martin, or they're about to be released? Not the Lee Harvey Oswald ones, but you've got a lot of files coming your way, haven't you?
Oh, what, as far as the JFK assassination?
Yeah.
There's, I think there are 5,000 documents left to be released of particular players like David Morales, Howard Hunt.
So, with them being released, do you think there's a chance that these Lee Harvey Oswald files could ever be released, or is that because
I've got to be honest, I think a lot of what we could have used from Oswald, actually, to use Oliver Stone term, actually, he was talking about this a while back, and he said that getting the files is like, he said he compared it to a car, and he said that a car that was once had the chrome fixings, it had the leather seats, it was shiny new tyres. He said, but now that car, probably all the tyres have gone, the leather has been ripped up, it's lost its shine. He said, but you still have the shell of the car. So what we get is going to be sanitised. I guarantee it. And anything from Oswald that we could have used to support any theory, conspiratorial theory, I think has been lost to us.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too cynical, but what do you think, Doug? I think there's not really anything that we could use to
I made a comment. I can't remember who I was talking to on my show that, it's a pipe dream if you think we're going to get anything useful out of those guys. And if there's anything useful still there, they will do all they can to block the release in 2017. And what we get is not going to be useful. Even though, in the wake of Stone's movie, they passed the JFK Records Act and they released millions of pages. And, we're still going through this. We're still going through these things and trying to find little tidbits of information to tie here and there. The problem with that is not only are there reams and reams of stuff that we haven't examined yet or people haven't examined in detail, getting a consensus in the research community as to what they mean is almost as futile as one person trying to go through them all.
Sorry, I think we touched on it the last show. You think that they released, I think it was 5 million documents when that JFK Act was passed, and they didn't actually release it in any order. It was just released in one big
you said that,
and you can't imagine what it's... Well, I can. Imagine trying to sit down and sift through that. If you put Oswald's name into the Mary Ferrell site, which holds a lot of... It's an archive sort of online library. Put Oswald's name in and you'll instantly come up with probably 35,000 different hits. And each of those hits, in each one of those hits, it's not like separate documents. It'll be one document that will have maybe 30 pages, and some of those pages won't even have anything to do with Oswald. And it's just... That's what you're facing.
So let's go back into the movie for a second here.
Yes.
Let's talk about someone other than Lee Harvey Oswald for a second, because there's someone I want to ask you about, Doug. Is a few scenes after that, we get another flashback scene where we see Joe Pesci speaking about, or they're in a room with Oswald and a bunch of anti-Castro guys.
Oh, the triangulation.
Yeah, and David Furry says, "Crossfire is the key. Look how close they got to De Gaulle." Now, Doug, you've mentioned on your show briefly about the attempt on Charles de Gaulle's life in 1962. So, are there actual links to the Kennedy assassination?
I'm not sure. It's claimed in the Torbett document, which is an interesting interesting work. If you guys get a chance to look that up and read through it, it was it first came out in 70 or 71 through a researcher named Mae Brussel, and she was kind of the pioneer in what I do with a a podcast. She had a show called Dialogue Conspiracy that started she did it out of Carmel, California, and she was a housewife who had spent 9 years researching the assassination up until she started a radio show, and it went on for about 20 years, and it was originally published anonymously under a pseudonym of William Torbett, and it claimed to know the truth. And they did make the connections, between the same forces that tried to assassinate de Gaulle assassinated Kennedy. And as far as hard proof of that, I've never read any hard proof of that, but the accusation has been made. For sure. Yeah. And there's a school of thought that, we know that the Central Intelligence Agency, the fact that they're complicit in numerous coups to murder and oust leaders in various countries. I mean, we know this happened from Guatemala to the Congo to what they were trying in Cuba, all over the world, Vietnam, the assassination of the two brothers there. I don't even know how to pronounce their name. Martin might.
The Diem brothers.
But that happened. Yeah, the Diem brothers. That's right. The Diem brothers. That happened. About a month and a half before Kennedy was killed at the beginning of October '63, and we know now that the CIA pretty well set that whole thing up, just like they orchestrated the coup. They got the Shah of Iran put into power in the '50s. But I'm not. Unlike Jim Garrison, I still remain unconvinced that the Kennedy assassination was a Central Intelligence Agency run op. And, but I can't say that they didn't. I guess that's a long way around your question. But no, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't.
Didn't you say on that episode, Doug? Possible. Didn't you say on that episode that some of the team that were involved in the de Gaulle attempt, didn't you say that there were some of the team that were also spotted in Dallas or something like that?
Well, there's a school of there are accusations that of a French Corsican assassin, Michael Mertz, or what was his other name? That was his alias. What was his other name? Lucien Sarty, who was a hitman, was involved in Dallas and involved in the de Gaulle thing. I'm not so
sorry, Doug. Hasn't Sarty? Isn't he the one that's got a rock solid alibi for not being there on the day? I'm sure. Yeah. Now
he was assassinating someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was actually killed by FBI agents in Mexico a few years after that, in Mexico City. But there are accusations that some of the same guys that were involved in the attempts, multiple attempts on de Gaulle were involved in Dallas. But I don't tend to lend those a whole lot of credence. They're out there, but I think that's a reach on a lot of people's part.
Sure, I think with de Gaulle as well, there's one school of thought that ties Bloomfield in with the assassination attempt, and once you get into Bloomfield, you're starting to go sort of involving that sort of Mertz and then Permindex and a whole other theory really. That sort of goes down to Zionist theory, I think. But that's an example again of you can just go take one person and it takes you right off down another alley of theory.
So on a day when a president is going for a drive, essentially, through Dallas, there seems to be an absolute abundance of shady characters. How is this even... It baffles me when people talk about who's all there, They say about, you guys have mentioned like 3 or 4 different people in the last episode, and this episode another 3 or 4 people. There was a lot of people there who kind of, very shady people. How does this happen? Is that just me being naive?
Yeah, are you talking about in Dallas?
Yeah, it's just like in there. Yeah.
There was a thing. Let me just find it here, because I've got a lot of notes. There was,
or is Dallas just a shady place as is?
Maybe that's what it is. No, there was a bit on one of the exposition scenes earlier on in the movie. There's a scene where Garrison's team are speaking about a group of hobos, about a group of clean-shaven hobos with new shoes and all that were photographed, and that they were never identified. Is that right? That's the kind of thing that you mean there?
Yeah.
You know.
But was one of them not Woody Harrelson's dad?
This is the thing. I think that it has been postulated that they've been given all sorts of names, but I think, and Doug might correct me, that actually someone discovered who they actually were back in the 2000, a few years back, and that there was a Dallas police arrest record, or whatever you want to call it, of their names, and actually their children sort of back this as well. But then other people say that actually that in itself is a red herring, that they were up to shenanigans. Yeah. But is that right, Doug? I think those traps have been legitimately named, haven't they?
Yeah, I think so. I can't name them offhand, of course, but yeah. I think we've the three tramps is probably a false flag.
Right.
But the bigger false flag, when you talk about the three tramps, if you remember that scene in JFK,
the guy with the
when the cop is walking, when the police officer's walking those three tramps you guys are asking about back to the police station, there's a guy, you see the back of his head, and he makes this little hand motion like he's signaling him. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah.
In the early 70s, the character that Donald Sutherland's character is based upon, a guy named Colonel Fletcher Prouty. He was a military intelligence guy inside the Pentagon, and he liaised with the Central Intelligence Agency, providing them with equipment, munitions, and logistical support for their secret Cuban war ops in this Operation Mongoose thing. And the guy that he worked with the closest on that was a guy named General Ed Lansdale, who was an Air Force general. Now, Ed Lansdale is the character that Gerald McCraney's character, General Y, is based on. In the early 70s, another general, ex-general, retired, named Victor Krulak, wrote a letter to Fletcher Prouty. And in this letter to Fletcher Prouty, he has seen this photograph of the three tramps, and there's a guy, that character that's walking by them on the sidewalk in front of the Texas School Book Depository, and the guy that allegedly makes the little hand signal to him, and he's looking at a photograph of the back of this guy's head. And what he does essentially is tell Prouty in this letter, that looks like Ed Lansdale, based on the back of his head. Now, I'm not saying it's not this CIA guy, Ed Lansdale, whose cover in the Pentagon was an Air Force general. But I think that is something that, again, as far as just blanketly blaming the assassination on the CIA, that's something that a lot of people in our community have taken. And my problem with that piece of evidence, and Martin may agree with me, and he knows I've got a problem with it, is that what we're doing, and this goes to something I kind of complain about on my show all the time, is people not really critically thinking about the evidence they're presented with. They just accept what someone else tells them as gospel truth. I'm not saying it's not Ed Lansdale, but this character, the general that the character General Y was based on. But I'm a little harder to convince than most people, and it was through that three tramps photo. I'm sorry, but show me a picture of the guy's face. But if, am I to just blanketly accept this identification made secondhand through a letter to somebody else 11 years after the fact, an identification based on a black and white blurry photograph of the back of some guy's head, and take off and run with it and go, well, that proves that the CIA did it? I'm not that easily convinced. I mean, I'm willing to be. It's like this whole school of thought that Lyndon Johnson was the mastermind. I don't buy that either, not for a minute.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, I know. I heard that. You're damn right, man. But at the same time, I'm willing to be convinced. But you're going to have to convince me. And I think that's as far as the three tramps thing goes, I think even more than speculating on who the tramps were, that's probably been more damaging to finding the truth than anything else, because, like I say, people just latch onto it and run with it.
Yeah.
As far as who the three tramps were, there was a book that came out in the late 70s, I believe, called Coup d'etat in America, and these guys had these transparent overlays. And they tried to prove that the tramps were, like you say, Charles Harrison. They tried to prove that one of them was E. Howard Hunt, who ran the Watergate burglary op, and a guy named Frank Sturgis, who was also a Watergate burglar. Now, Sturgis was embedded with all these guys. There's no doubt about that. But I do not believe that the tramps were those guys. And I think Martin's correct in saying that that's probably been put to rest, I'd say.
Film does depict, a lot of dodgy people and a lot of possible, involvements from intelligence agencies. But Doug is correct that if you concentrate on, if you go with the school that says there were lots and lots of infamous characters all piled in Dallas on that day, then you're going to get lost in the whole, the CIA did it as a whole, or the mob did it. But if you concentrate on who actually was there, that documented that was there, for instance, there's a guy called Eugene Bradley who was arrested. He was at one of the
yes.
I can't remember which building it is now, but he was arrested on the second or third floor. The police arrested him, and they just let him go. And he had no business being where he was. And it's later found out that he had a lot of connections with the underbelly, the mafia, and he also turned up again at Robert Kennedy's assassination, and he was a character that was there on the day. So there are people that are there on the day that you can quite legitimately research, rather than sort of going around the houses on who might have been there.
Yeah. So let's stick with that for a second.
He's exactly right. Martin's exactly right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Ahead.
I was actually just going to say let's stick with that theme for a second, because this guy isn't in the movie, but it's a guy that you've spoken about, Doug, and you've told me about quite a lot, who was there in Dallas on the day, and the guy's name was Joseph Miltier.
Joseph Miltier, I'm convinced, was absolutely photographed in Dealey Plaza that day. Joseph Miltier was a racist. He was a violent racist. We know now that he was the one that arranged the Birmingham church bombing that killed 2 little girls. Later on in the 60s, he paid for that. And Miltier was photographed in Dealey Plaza that day. What makes that profound to me is that Joseph Miltier, when we get done at the end of the day with all the speculation, there's only one man that we knew beyond a shadow of a doubt absolutely, positively had foreknowledge of the assassination of John Kennedy, and that's Joseph Miltier. On November 9th of 63, an FBI informant let the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he let him wiretap his apartment. And Joseph Miltier visited him, and Joseph Miltier told him point blank on this tape, and we've got the tape now, that Kennedy knows he's a marked man. It's in the works, he tells Somerset. Somerset, well, how in the hell do you think you're going to get him? He says, from a building with a high-powered rifle. And they will pick someone up after the shooting to throw the public off. Now, this tape. So after the assassination, they send this FBI agent to hound him, to question him, to see what he's up to. But they never told the guy about the tape. The FBI agent sent to investigate him after the assassination was not told about this tape of him telling Somerset, in effect,
Sorry, just to interrupt there. They didn't. As soon as Somerset passed that information on, didn't his bosses? They basically blew his cover, didn't they? So he was basically rendered useless after that. With that information and that with Milton.
Well, actually, he was an informant for a lot of years after that. And I'll tell you something else about Somerset, the informant that got Miltier on tape. The night before Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, he called the FBI, William Somerset, and told the FBI, they are going to kill Martin Luther King tomorrow.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
He absolutely told them that. The same informant that got military on tape. Now, if you guys want to, there's so much speculation. People have spent 52 years going through the photographs and well, this one looks like this guy in the CIA, or that one could be that guy, or we heard that this guy was in Dealey Plaza and somebody said this guy was there. But there are people that we know were in Dealey Plaza, and they're all documented, and they're all members of United States Army intelligence. There's absolutely no way around it. It's documented. I'll give you an example. There was a guy named Jim Powell standing on the corner in front of the Texas School Book Depository. Now, who was Jim Powell? Jim Powell in the late 50s. Are you guys, I know the guy didn't get much play in the movie at all, but are you familiar with a man named George de Mohrenschildt?
The name rings a bell, but it may have been from listening to your show. I don't remember him in the movie. It all kind of merges together.
George de Mohrenschildt was a rich white Russian. In other words, his family was Russian exile. He was an oil geologist, and and when I say exile, that means anti-communist. And he befriended the Oswalds, and quote unquote befriended the Oswalds when they came back over from Russia, and he was Oswald's best friend for a while there in Dallas, until about 10 days after somebody tried to pop Walker. Suddenly he's off to Haiti working for the Haitian government as an oil geologist. At the same time, Oswald flees Dallas after the Walker shooting and goes to New Orleans. Well, in the early 50s, while Oswald's still in Russia, George de Mohrenschildt was tasked by the oil industry the oil industry, it may have been the government also, in going to Cuba prior to the Castro Revolution and buying up all of the futures oil leases in Cuba that he possibly could. And Dr. Walt Brown speculates that it was in preparation for a time when the United States government saw maybe a regime change in their favor, a coup, ousting Batista. It was ready to go. Well, his partner in obtaining these oil leases was Jim Powell. Now, Jim Powell, on the day of the assassination in 1963, while Lee Oswald, our patsy, and the man and that de Mohrenschildt had befriended and mentored, the communist that the anti-communist had befriended, is up in the school book depository, allegedly getting ready to pop Kennedy and shoot Walker. Jim Powell just happened to be standing in front of the school book depository that day. He just happened to take the famous Powell photograph of that allegedly shows somebody behind the window in the sniper's nest. Well, in the minutes after the assassination, the police locked the building down. Well, Jim Powell got caught inside the building. He had to show his identification before the police would allow him out, and that identification showed him to be an active duty, plain-clothes agent of United States Army intelligence. The two guys in the pilot car, the car that was a couple of spaces up ahead of Kennedy, basically leading the motorcade, were Lumpkin and Whittemire. One was with the Dallas Police Department, one was deputy chief, and one was worked for the sheriff's office. Lumpkin and Whittemire. They also just happened to be the district co-commanders of the 488 United States Army Intelligence Reserve stationed in Dallas. When Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested with the Alex J. Heidel ID, we later find in the testimony of Colonel Robert E. Jones, who was the commanding officer of the Southern District of United States Army Intelligence, a United States Army Intelligence agent that he had working inside the Dallas Police Department called him and gave him the Heidel ID. Excuse me. They've arrested this guy, Heidel. Well, Jones is the one that pulled the file that cross-referenced Heidel with Oswald and gave them the Oswald ID, gave him his real identification. 2 days before the assassination, a man named J.D. Wilmoth showed up at Ruth Payne's house to talk to Marina. Why? Well, he was retired, and he wanted to learn Russian. He spent 3.5 hours with Ruth Payne and Marina Oswald alone on the 19th. Well, who was J.D. Wilmoth? Now we know that J.D. Wilmoth was retired United States Army Intelligence Colonel J.D. Wilmoth, who in 1944 was part of the Moscow delegation to the Soviet Army in Moscow. He was fluent in Russian. The man taught Russian at a community college in Dallas. Jeez. Why was he there? Dr. Walt Brown, and I kind of believe him, he was the bearer of the bad news. It's speculated that his job was to let Ruth and Marina know, guess what? The sky is about to fall on Chicken Little.
Yeah.
You can either go along with us or buck us and face the consequences. But he was the warning. And what makes the Army intelligence angle so other than everybody we knew that, we know were in Army intelligence that were in and around Dealey that day and in and around Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald, back to the movie a little bit. After a while, Lee Oswald realized that the cavalry wasn't coming. He was in jail. He was going to be in jail. And his buddies weren't going to save him. And guys, he reached out for help one time. He didn't try to contact Clay Shaw. He didn't try to contact Guy Bannister. He didn't try to contact David Ferry. He didn't try to contact anybody connected to the Central Intelligence Agency. When he reached out for help the one time, he tried to reach a man named John Hurt in Raleigh, North Carolina. Well, now we know that John Hurt was Lieutenant John Hurt, Nags Head, North Carolina, United States Army Intelligence.
They don't mention that. They don't really mention that at all in the movie, do they? They don't cover that.
No, and Martin, you can speak to this. There's a big segment of the population, and Garrison was certainly on that road that just lays 100% of the blame on the CIA.
Yeah. And I don't. Again, this is the problem. Realistically, if you think about it, like Doug says, if you just sit and think about it, you can't just say it was the CIA that did it. It's a perfect red herring for a lot of the peeps. I mean, thing is, what Garrison was aiming at, he did uncover a lot of the right, and the movie says it shows this quite well. He uncovered a lot of the right stones, and but I think he overlooked a lot of stuff as well. He overlooked a lot of the possible, some of the key people and the key personnel involved. But again, saying that this whole idea that the great whole agencies committed this crime is just misunderstanding. It's going to take you to the wrong place.
Yeah, you kind of touched on that in the last episode, Martin, saying that there was many different factions of many different organisations that were kind of involved. None of them had the whole pie. Just a lot of them had many different parts of the pie.
I think it was a very small operation on its genesis.
Yeah.
The actual hit itself, and as Doug has said, and I agree, the mistake people make is that they join the hit and the cover up as one whole thing. And if you try and latch the cover up onto it, it does become a massive morass, a whole shadow conspiracy. But if you take away the cover up and just look at the assassination itself and the hit itself, it is a really the place itself is, as we said in the last show, is a very small place. The hit itself would be a small operation with a core team, and the cover up after that was just a clever foresight from someone in the hit team that was able to, who had information relating to what Oswald was up to as a dangle, and they used that so that the people that had to cover their asses after the hit, they had to, just by their association with Oswald, I think.
Just to kind of throw everyone off, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Chris has got something else he wants to touch on.
Yeah, so after a few more exposition scenes and what have you, and in the movie.
The movie is full of
Hey, guys, real quick. I want to apologize that me and Martin keep going off on tangents, but to be fair, as researchers into the Kennedy assassination and deep politics in general, it's kind of what we do. And
that's why we've got you on.
We probably why we spend so much time chasing our tails and arguing with each other too. But I'm sorry.
To be honest, Doug and Martin, that's why we wanted to get you on. We both absolutely love the JFK movie, and it's an interesting like, whether you, like you say, you're boiling it down to just the simple assassination. That in itself is interesting, but if you're going to look at everything else that came along with it, it's a labyrinth. It's an absolute maze. So if you're going to go on tangents, I can understand that.
I think one's about to come up. Soon after that in the movie, we're told by Bill Broussard, played by Michael Rooker, very young Michael Rooker.
Give him the credit he deserves. He plays that role pretty damn good.
He does, yeah.
He was great in Tombstone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was. And also, what was it called? Sylvester Stallone one? Cliffhanger. Anyway.
I thought you were going to say Henry there. Henry was a good film.
Henry?
Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Anyway. So we're tangenting now. Right. So Bill reveals that he's discovered that the name of Clay Bertram is an alias of Clay Shaw, which is when we get into this is when the movie really kicks off, because it's when Garrison starts to pursue the trial and all that kind of thing. So what sort of can you tell us about the character of Clay Shaw? I mean, is he as Tommy Lee Jones portrayed him? Is he a made-up character, or is he real, or
amalgamation of a few sort of thing again?
Yeah, like
Donald Sutherland's character.
Donald Sutherland.
No, I think actually I would go as far as to say that he's got quite close to, I mean, not that I know, but I think he's got pretty close to what Clay Shaw stood for and what he was up to. I think the character is an amalgamation of witness testimony about who Clay Shaw, obviously, who he was. But what you find about the trial in itself in relation to the movie, I think the movie obviously can give both sides, but it doesn't really show how it does. But imagine at that time trying to pin Clay Shaw in any way, in any relation to intelligence, his friendship with Ferry. There was no one that was helping Garrison. There was no one that was prepared to stand up, and those that were being intimidated. And so, yeah, sure, definitely. I think it is a really good portrayal of him.
Sure,
to be honest.
I would agree 100%. They pretty well nailed him in the movie. As far as complicity in the pre-planning of the assassination, I've never bought that 100%. That he knew Oswald, yes. That he knew Oswald, yes. That he might have helped to babysit him or handle him, or I cannot. Clay Shaw being that close to Guy Bannister, not so sure about. Guy Bannister was a notorious misogynist. He was a notorious right-winger. He was a notorious racist. He was the kind of guy that invoked Jesus Christ as a way to justify his racism and segregation. And whether or not he would work that close with a blatant out-and-out homosexual like Shaw was, I can't say that he wouldn't. But I would, because obviously Shaw was a money man. But we do know, and I believe it was in Martin, I don't know if it was in the late 70s or the early 80s, or was it during the Assassination Records Review Board stuff in the wake of Stone's film when they released everything. The CIA did admit, finally, and we have it on paper, that Clay Shaw was, a number of different, for a few years here and a few years there, he was a paid contract agent of the Central Intelligence Agency. We know that.
Wasn't that put up at the end of the movie? Wasn't that a thing at the end of the movie? You know how they said about the the Records Act, and then I'm sure after that it said that they said that Clay Shaw was probably engaged with something to do with the CIA or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
sure
in, the
that
late
was the
50,
screen
in the late 50s, I think, yeah, from 56 to 59 or something like
right.
that. But here, look, here we have a great example again, and Doug's hit the nail right on the head, where I was saying earlier about the film and Garrison, by association, got close, but they fell into exactly the same trap that actually you could relate it to what researchers do. Clay Shaw, I agree 100%. I don't think he had anything to do. I don't think he had anything to do with the assassination. But by association, because he was involved in an operation that involved Oswald, or he was involved in something that connected him to Oswald, he was forced into that situation. So he was forced by association to have to try and... It took to cover himself, and also in Garrison doing that, he did a good thing by bringing this to the public, but he also brought he basically created a big red herring as well. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So
I think that Shaw, as far as indicting Clay Shaw, I'm not so sure, and I've heard people much smarter than me, opine in this manner that when Ferry died, when David Ferry died, and when Eladio Del Valle was found dead, on the same day, he was sort of painted into a corner. And maybe indicting Shaw was a way to try to flush out the real bad guys in the background, and putting Shaw on trial. But I almost, I get a big sense that indicting Shaw and putting him on trial may have been almost a desperation move on Garrison's part. Would you agree, Martin?
Yeah, actually, I would agree, because I think... See, the thing is with Garrison, obviously Costner is Kevin Costner, and it's not... I don't think they had to have a star man to carry that role, but Garrison is a very, very, very frustrating character to read, and the history of the trial, of what he... Yeah, I think he had to do what he did. Once he was in, but he was so also... There's so many things that he missed, that Garrison missed, that he almost became... really laid back in his attitude. There are things that happened that he could have stopped, I'm sure. But
there's a line, I think it's a Donald Sutherland line, where Garrison says something, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, and Sutherland goes, well, you don't have any choice but to do this. If you don't do this, you're a dead man, kind of thing.
Yeah, I suppose that's... and I suppose because he was such in the public eye, just simply by doing what he was doing, that kind of might have... I mean, this is just a suggestion, but that probably, saved his life in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the character...
Because he became too high profile to get rid of, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hey, are you a jock that likes comics?
Are you a nerd that likes comics?
Do you feel left out sometimes?
Well, then we've got the show for you.
I'm Imran.
And I'm Anthony.
He's the jock.
And he's the nerd.
And we host the Jock and Nerd podcast at jockandnerd.com. If you're looking for fun, entertaining, laugh-out-loud geek chat over all the latest Marvel, DC shows and news, visit jockandnerd.com.
Full spoiler podcast, lots of swearing.
You're such a jock.
You're such a nerd.
Oh, come on.
Shut up, nerd.
Okay.
In a world where so many podcasts offer TV and movie news, along comes another one filled to the brim with podcasty goodness that is only slightly better at best.
Admit it, you're always looking for a new brand of meaningless movie nonsense in your podcast diet.
Look for the 365Flicks podcast on Twitter, iTunes, Stitcher, and all good third-party podcast apps. You can also swing by the Facebook page.
Come join in on the adventures of Kev, a pissy ex-video store clerk.
And Chris, a Scottish Whedon Hall.
We're your vocal heroes of pissy opinion.
We bring you all the latest TV and movie news, reviews, and general geeky rants.
As well as a bunch of top fives that you really won't care about. So whether you're Team Iron Man or Team Cap,
you're Team Batman or Team Superman,
drop on by the 365Flicks podcast, where the Chris vs. Kev Civil War never stops.
This is the podcast you're looking for. So can we jump back into Lee Oswald a little bit? Just before you mentioned about the Powell on just outside the book depository. Can we kind of get back to that? And you wanna hit on this?
The rifle.
Yeah. So basically, Lee Harvey Oswald is famously known for the guy who did or didn't take the shot. And I remember it's like they touch on it in the movie that his marksmanship skills was like basically passable. You know, it wasn't amazing. It was passable for the marks in the class to get through. So obviously he didn't take these shots. What's your kind of sense on this?
Well, firstly, let me just jump in here. There is testimony in the WC, the Warren Commission reports, and I can't remember the soldier, but Doug will probably know, that they state that he was an awful shot. They state that he was an awful shot. That is just for the beginning. And you've got to think, by the time that that day came along, he'd been out of shooting for years. He hadn't been training. You know, he hadn't been using the gun every day, or a long time before that, he'd stopped. He wasn't training as a sniper. Just on that point alone. What do you think, Doug?
I think, yeah. As far as his marksmanship skills go, he may have been a passable marksman. But I think the problem is when you start to get, not necessarily looking at at Oswald's marksmanship skills or lack thereof. It's when you really go into detail and in depth on the rifle that he allegedly used and on the ballistics of the rifle as it relates to the hit. I'll give you an example. Now they make a big deal in the movie about Commission Exhibit 399, the magic bullet. Okay? The magic bullet. Now, there are people in the community that are still arguing about the veracity of the magic bullet theory. It can happen. It can't happen. It's possible. It's not possible. It did happen. It didn't happen. And people use everything from trigonometry to geometry to algebra to alchemy to try to prove or disprove this magic bullet theory. And Kevin, Chris, you guys know what I'm talking about, where Costner's got the guys lined up with the pointer. Yep. Now, I tell you what, let's throw all that out, okay? And let's throw all that out. Let's put it aside for a minute, and let's assume we'll give Oswald the benefit of the doubt that he was a great shot. Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Now we're going to go to the House Select Committee on Assassination's testimony in 1977. This is when the government re-examined the Kennedy assassination. And oh, by the way, little digression here. Their final report states that John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated due to a conspiracy. And they recommended to the Justice Department to reopen the case. Wow. But as far as we know, that recommendation is still sitting on somebody's desk. But anyway, back to the marksmanship, back to the rifle, okay? Back to Lee Oswald. Now, in 1977, the FBI sent a guy named Yates. He was their ballistics guy up to Capitol Hill to testify in front of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And you can find this testimony online, guys. It's right there in black and white, and the guy testifies under oath. He says, when they ask him, did you compare your test bullets to the FBI test bullets that were fired for the Warren Commission in 1963? This is 14 years later. He says, yes. They said, were they the same? You know, they test fired a batch of bullets through Oswald's alleged rifle, this Mannlicher Carcano World War II surplus rifle that the Italians nicknamed the humanitarian rifle during World War II because they said it never hurt anybody on purpose. Okay?
Jesus.
Now, yeah, that's true. So they asked him, do your test bullets match the test bullets that the FBI fired 14 years ago? He says under oath, yes, they did. Then they say, did you compare Commission Exhibit 399, this magic bullet, this pristine bullet that, you know, Costner puts up on the rail in front of the jury in the movie? This is the bullet that was supposedly caused 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wounds in 2 people, and broke a wrist, broke a rib, passed through all this tissue, but came out squeaky clean. And Yates says yes. He says under oath, we compared that bullet to both sets of test bullets. They ask him, what did you find? Remember, This is on high at Capitol Hill in front of Congress under oath. This is what he says. There were significant differences in the lands and grooves on Commission Exhibit 399, the bullet, and the lands and grooves on both sets of FBI bullets. There were significant differences. The lands are the wider, flat areas between the grooves, which are thinner and deep. That's how you test bullets. That is how you match bullets to guns. There was a significant difference in the lands and grooves on 399 and on both sets of test bullets. They asked him, what does this mean? Were you able to conclusively tie this bullet to that rifle? And he says this: no, we were not able to match Commission Exhibit 399 conclusively to the exclusion of all other rifle barrels to the Mannlicher Carcano barrel. They ask him again, are you saying they don't match? And he says, he repeats himself, I'm saying we were unable to conclusively tie 399 to the exclusion of all other rifle barrels to this rifle. Now, what does that tell me? That tells me that it doesn't matter what kind of geometry, physics, trigonometry, algebra, angles, triangles, alchemy, wizardry. It doesn't matter a hill of beans whether you're on me and Martin's side of the fence or if you're on the Lone Nutter side of the fence. It doesn't matter what kind of acrobatics you think that bullet was capable of once it left that rifle barrel, because the Federal Bureau of Investigation under oath told Congress that that bullet was never in that barrel to begin with.
Wow.
I'd like to add to that, and it's something that Doug will be all too familiar with, and many researchers will be very familiar with. But again, going to the Warren Commission report itself, there are a few things, maybe 3 or 4 points that I always try and point out to lone gun theorists, and they always seem to just kind of that you can see the eyes rolling over and they don't want to answer it. And it's there was the FBI called to they were called a fingerprint expert to the stand of the Warren Commission when it came to the rifle. His name was Ray Latona, I think, and he was the pin-up boy for. He'd done over 100,000 fingerprint tests. He was the man to go to when they were testing any gun, to find out who'd handled it.
Yeah.
And they asked him, basically, what were the state of Oswald's fingerprints on the rifle? Were there any, what were his? Did he hold the gun? And his answer was, I can't remember exactly, but he said that there were the fingerprints were of no latent value. That he couldn't actually relate those fingerprints to Oswald at all. So that's one thing. The other thing is you've got to think that when the Dallas police sort of put the rifle in front of the press and they held, there's a picture where they're holding it in the air, and by that they asked, have you found any prints on the rifle? And their answer was no. For 2 days there was no record of them having found any prints on the rifle. So that's another thing I always like to point out. And the other thing is, and this again is something well known amongst the community, is that when they were trying to test the rifle, the Warren Commission, they had to apply, and I can see the lone gun theorists going, oh god, here we go. But they don't want to answer this question. They don't want to justify it. That when they were trying to fire it, they had to apply shims to the rifle so that they could balance the telescope, so that they could, get it to work. The telescope had to be repaired as well, and the trigger and the bolt they were in such a state that they couldn't aim the rifle properly anyway. So that's the Warren Commission saying that, not anyone else. That's not people going it was a conspiracy. That's in the Warren Commission report. So if you've got that in the report, these simple things, and I think the other thing is, Doug probably know more about it, is that when they looked in the chamber where you put the bullet, it was rusted. They had to oil it to get the thing to work. So what it said to them was that the rifle hadn't been used.
Right.
So
that's crazy, man.
That's just the rifle. That's just little things. I mean, you've got the palm print that they discovered. I think it's Lieutenant Day discovered on there. That he took the print but didn't take a photo. And when the FBI took the rifle, they couldn't find any record of the palm print. You know, so no, he took the photo, but they couldn't find any evidence of the palm print after that. So you've got all these little things that join up, and even if you're a lone gunman, theorists, you've got to ask why are there these anomalies in that case?
Yeah.
I suppose now it kind of, it's beside the point now because we now know the explanation behind the magic bullet, don't we? It was Michael Fassbender. It was Magneto.
You nailed it.
Well, originally there was no magic bullet theory. They had three wounds. They had 3 wounds. They had 3 bullets, but something happened, and it's portrayed in the movie, and that was a witness named James Tague. James Tague was standing way off on the other side of the road, leaning up against the inside of the triple overpass, on the side of the traffic coming the opposite direction of where the motorcade was going. And he got nicked in the face by a ricochet of concrete from where a stray bullet hit the curbing. They had to explain that away. So what they did, and we know this now because we've even got the documents to prove it, that a Warren commissioner named Gerald Ford, who would later become president of the United States, moved Kennedy's back wound down his back 5 inches, and he got together with Arlen Specter, who was a counsel for the Warren Commission, and they invented the magic bullet theory out of whole cloth. They had to account for the fact that they only had 3 empty shells, and they've already publicly stated there were only 3 shots fired, but they had a guy down the road injured by a ricochet, by a bullet that missed the limo completely. So how do we explain this away? Well, we put 1 bullet down there, ricocheting and injuring Tague. But now we've got to figure out a way for 2 bullets to create all of these wounds, every one of them.
Yeah.
And they explained it away by, it passed through Kennedy, came out of his throat, then went into Connolly, and it just doesn't fly. It just doesn't fly because when you look at the trajectory where it had to have went in his back and come out his throat, he literally would have had to be bending over, tying his shoes in the limo, bending forward, tying his shoes, Kennedy, I mean, for the trajectory to even come anywhere close to working. But we know because of, the Nix film and certainly the Zapruder film that at no time was he bent over that way.
Sure. Yeah.
They had to explain James Tague away somehow. And it wasn't until about halfway through the Warren Commission proceedings that the magic bullet theory suddenly became a way to do that. And it was literally just invented out of whole cloth.
It is a great theory, though. It's just
it's great for the movie.
I mean, like you say, for a movie, it's a fantastic theory to have, but my God, it's just ridiculous.
You do have to think, what was the guy on when he came up with that?
Yeah.
That'll do.
One of the Warren commissioners was a guy named Alan Dulles, who was the former director of Central Intelligence, who was fired by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. And we know from the Warren Commission meeting, or minutes of their meetings, that he told the rest of the commission pretty much, look, don't worry about it. The American people are never going to read this. The American people do not read. And that's a Dulles quote. He said, we can put anything we want in it. People they'll believe us. Don't worry about it. And they really thought that, America would go, well, that's, if you say so, fine. And the majority of Americans did. And thankfully we got to be thankful for people like Penn Jones and Mark Lane and Harold Weisberg and, all the first generation researchers who were smart enough not to buy it, But yeah, they didn't think the American people were going to read this stuff. 26 volumes? That's a set of encyclopedias. Who the hell's going to read that?
Yeah. So maybe if it wasn't for the trial and what have you that brought it to public attention, maybe nobody would ever have looked at it, kind of thing.
And I'll tell you, that's another point about when they did release the Warren Commission report. That was unindexed as well, so it was just released wholesale as one big folder. And Doug mentioned Mae Brussel earlier, who has that brilliant, who's done a brilliant run of radio shows, did a brilliant run of radio shows, and she went through that Warren Commission report page by page and indexed it herself. So
right.
that's so it's people like he said like that have helped us later on to sort of understand what the Warren Commission report was about.
Wow. So let's go on to the last bit of the movie where we're in the trial of Clay Shaw then, because there's a lot of information given to us on that, but we'll try and we'll try and keep it brief. We'll try and keep it brief and wrap it up. Get to the end of the movie. So we're in the trial now. One of the first bits of information that we're given is that Lee Harvey Oswald went into an FBI building 2 weeks before the assassination. Now, it's suggested in the movie that he tried to warn the FBI about the attempt on JFK's life. Now, is this Oliver Stone, or is there actual evidence to support this?
If it's, I can't quite remember the end of that. If it's the letter that he dumped in there that was meant for James Hosty, I think it was more that he was complaining that Hosty was hassling his wife. I personally don't think that Stone's right there. I don't think he tried to warn anyone about the assassination, because he was the patsy, and by being the patsy, he wouldn't have known what was going to. I don't think he knew what was going to go down until it happened. And that's when
so he was just sort of told. He was told to go to the school book depository on that day.
I think it was a bit long. I don't think that day, but I think he obviously had got the job there. So
all right. So told to report to there for work.
Yeah,
and then obviously when it went down, he was going to get the blame.
I think so. I think that's the short and curly of it.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's all right.
Dr. Walt Brown. There's a school of thought. I was going to say there's a school of thought, and there may be some credibility to it, that Oswald knew something was going to happen that day, that he knew that it had to do with Cuba, but he wasn't sure what. There's even a sort of a theory that I've heard a few people, speculate on, that it was going to be a fake assassination attempt to implicate Castro, and that Oswald knew that was going to happen, that all he knew was, here's what you got to do. You got to get this rifle in that building. Somebody named Heidel will be blamed, because they had tied, the rifle was ordered by Heidel, not Oswald. And that he thought he was playing that role, that he never for a minute, thought that these guys were really going to kill Kennedy, and that he was going to get the blame for it. I do agree with Martin, though. My gut tells me that, when it was over, as soon as he heard the president was shot, and the president was shot outside, he knew immediately that he'd been set up, and he knew immediately exactly who had done it. I've often said about Oswald that I believe him to be not guilty.
Yeah.
But I'm not willing to go as far as innocent. I will declare him not guilty of the crimes accused of, but I will not call him innocent.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've got to, can I just jump
because
in?
I think he knew.
I just jump in with you were saying earlier, Kev or Chris, that about that he was going to be he was placed there on that day in that building. It sounds a bit kind of sort of fairy tale. He just happened to be put there, and that's how they're going to work out. You've got to, I think, with Oswald, and this is again something else to go into another time. You've got to look at the path that he took in the months leading up to that, where he found himself on that day, to make more sense than him happen to be put in that building for that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in the last episode, Martin, that he was offered a job somewhere else, paying more money, but he ended up there instead
due to Ruth Payne.
Yeah.
And, she has her own sort of affiliations and secrets to reveal.
Mm-hmm.
But just with regards to where Oswald found himself on that day, it wasn't just a sort of there was a lot of a build up to that, a lot of manoeuvring by people putting him there.
leaving Lee Harvey Oswald behind again for a second. Another one of the bits of information or suggestions that were given during the trial. We're told that on the 26th of November, President Johnson reversed Kennedy's policies on Vietnam. Now, is this Oliver Stone or is this actual fact?
No, it's for real. And the scary part is, was it the 21st when the pencil draft of the order rescinding all that, or was it the 21st or 22nd, Martin?
What's that?
The draft of the memo, the National Security Action Memo, reversing Kennedy's Vietnam troops policy, was actually drafted, I believe, the day before he was killed.
I think it is, yeah. I think so.
Yeah, I remember that being mentioned by Martin in the last episode, yeah.
But yeah, now whether or not, I don't believe that Johnson made that decision on his own. I believe Johnson was told to do that.
Yeah.
By his new bosses, who I think were probably the same people that arranged Kennedy's murder. He didn't have a choice in the matter. There's this whole school of thought about, Johnson reversed Kennedy's thing. Johnson was the mastermind behind the assassination. Johnson ran the cover-up. Johnson. I don't buy it. Because the second that guy could get clear of Washington and turn tail and run back to Texas and hide, he got the hell out of there.
Yeah.
He went on TV and said, I will not run for the nomination and I will not accept it. Pretty much saying, you guys can kiss my ass and have it. I'm out of here. Because I don't think Johnson's presidency was Johnson's presidency. The escalation of the Vietnam War was not because Lyndon Johnson wanted to. It was because Lyndon Johnson was told this is how it's going to go. You can have your civil rights reforms. You can have the civil right, the Civil Rights Act. You can do this domestically. You can do that domestically, Johnson. Whatever you want to do. But as far as geopolitics goes, and as far as the war effort goes, foreign policy, we're going to handle that. You don't have any say-so in it. I do believe that it was a military coup in Dallas that day, and Lyndon Johnson had military masters from the day he took office from the 22nd he took that oath until the day he turned tail and ran out of Washington. He didn't have a choice, I don't believe. I was reading, in this school of thought, I'm going off on another tangent here, this school of thought that Johnson was the mastermind, they ignore so much evidence to the contrary. Yeah, he reversed Kennedy's policy, but he was told to. We have on tape, J. Edgar Hoover calling Lyndon Johnson the night of the assassination, and Lyndon Johnson, with nervous laughter and real fear in his voice, asking Hoover, were any of those shots fired at me? Do you think they were trying to kill me too? Yes, it's on tape. We also have Hoover on tape calling Johnson and telling him, the tapes of allegedly Oswald in Mexico City, when the wiretap tapes, when he was down in Mexico City visiting the Cuban and Russian consulates, trying to get visas into Cuba and Russia, which it wasn't him, by the way. Oswald was impersonated there too. We've got Hoover on tape telling Johnson, our FBI agents have listened to these tapes. That they say that is not Lee Harvey Oswald. He knew this.
Sorry, God, I was just going to say that even in knowing that, with almost desperacy, he called the Warren Commission together, and we've again got the calls between him and Justice Chief Warren, and he cajoles, he forces him to start to head that. He uses the threat of nuclear war. He desperately moves to get the Warren Commission in place.
And the quote is, he told somebody else, they said, well, how did you get Warren to take the helm for the Warren Commission, to lead the commission? And he tells them, I told him something that Hoover told me about Mexico City. And what he told him was, Hoover told me that was not Oswald on those tapes. that the FBI had listened to those tapes. They were not Oswald. Somebody impersonated him there. And he threatened him. He said, if the Russians or the Cubans are involved, it's going to lead to World War II. He told Warren, he goes, if you don't do this, if we don't cover this up, 40 million Americans could die. And that's why Warren did it. Warren came out of that meeting with LBJ with tears in his eyes. This is documented by other people that witnessed it. He was scared too. And of course, in hindsight being 2020, we've got Hoover on tape going, that's not Oswald. We've got Johnson on the record telling Warren that wasn't Oswald. But by the time the Warren Commission rolled around, it was. They tried to tell us that was Oswald visiting the Soviet consulate. It was Oswald visiting the Cuban consulate. And the CIA for years maintained that the tapes themselves were actually destroyed as a matter of routine and reused in October. That's what it says in the Warren report. But we know for a fact that they were not destroyed. Warren Commission staffers in the 70s, or maybe it was in the 90s to the ARRB, I can't remember which, but they admitted under oath that in the summer of 64, when they went on their little fact-finding mission to Mexico City for the Warren Commission, that the tapes of the imposter of Oswald was played for them by the CIA's Mexico City station. Nothing was left to chance. Anything they could do to make this guy into a lone nut, they did it.
Although
they covered up.
Although you've got to look at the, you've got to look at the phase one, and Peter Dale Scott's theory on the phase 1 and phase 2 ideas. Those first intercepts coming out of Mexico, where they say that they're trying to paint Oswald as basically a Castro communist assassin, and then you have the preceding intercepts which paint the lone gunman picture of Oswald. So they are covering all bases basically.
And I think the theory Martin's getting into there is that the plotters themselves, the people that organized the murder plot, and this is when we're talking about, you can't lump the cover-up and the murder conspiracy together. That it's you have to look at it as two different things. When you really look, and when he's talking about Peter Dale Scott's phase 1 and phase 2, there was a phase 1 that was the plan by the people that actually murdered Kennedy. That was to set Oswald up as a pro-Castro assassin. The stories coming out of Mexico City was that Oswald went down there and spoke to a guy named Valery Kostakov, who was the head of the KGB's Western Hemisphere branch of what they called Division 13, which Division 13 was the KGB's wet work or assassinations division. And the impersonation of Oswald places him in the company of Kostakov a month and a half before the assassination. Well, after Kennedy is killed, what happens is Lee Oswald manages to not get killed while being taken into custody in the Texas theater. He manages to make it out alive. Now, if he dies there, the story ends there. He is a pro-Castro, Soviet-connected assassin. He's right then and there, it ends. But he lived. And once Johnson finds out, well, that's not him in Mexico City. It's not him. The school of thought that I tend to run with there is that they spun. They had 48 hours to spin him from a pro-Castro Soviet-connected assassin to a lone nutter malcontent, specifically to do an end run around the murder plotters and avoid the invasion of Cuba and avoid World War III. In effect, they were doing damage control and thwarting the phase 1 plot, which was Kennedy was killed by a Castro sympathizer, a non-affiliated with anybody lone nutter Oswald, specifically to avoid that. And there's a school of thought, and I do give it a little credence, that Vietnam and Southeast Asia, that proxy war that was essentially, over opium and oil, let's face it, was their consolation prize. We're not going to go total war on the Soviet Union. We're not going to invade and take back Cuba. But I tell you what, go to Southeast Asia, guys, and do your thing. Do your thing. There is, and I just read this for the first time ever the other day. I can't remember his name right away, but he was Lyndon Johnson's chief of staff. And he told the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1977 that Lyndon Johnson, I was reading his testimony, that Lyndon Johnson, he told them this, that Lyndon Johnson was convinced that United States military intelligence was involved in the assassination of John Kennedy.
Lyndon Johnson
and he
said
told
that.
him this. That, according to his former chief of staff, whose name I can't remember right now, he did tell the House Select Committee on Assassinations that Johnson confided in him. That's what he thought, that those guys were involved. And Johnson has very famously made the comment that he always thought, all he would say is, I always wondered if there were others involved, because we were running our own damned Murder Incorporated in the Caribbean. And I think he was talking about the mercenaries and assassins that were trained for the secret Cuban War. I mean, what else could he be talking about? He's hinting, I think. And I don't think that guy couldn't wait to get away from Washington. He couldn't wait to get away from there.
Christ, no wonder.
And, yeah, it does.
I know.
It doesn't really pay, does it?
So we're pretty much at the end of the trial now. Now, there's one more thing. There's one more thing that is kind of suggested that is, not on the up and up, is the shooting of Officer Tippett.
Is this in relation to Lee Harvey?
Yes.
Right.
So that's pretty much at the end of the movie. So it's suggested that it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald, that it was a fake, and all that kind of thing. So just as one last kind of what the hell's going on, what can you tell us about the shooting of Officer Tippett?
It's quite a big thing in itself, Tippett. But I will say from my...
That's twice I've done that now.
You like to end on a bombshell, don't you?
Well, my basic... I haven't really looked too much into the Tippett thing, but I can say that the witness accounts of who Oswald, who shot Tippett, it does not really relate to what Oswald looked like. Some of the witnesses, they're looking at the back of his head, him walking away from Tippett after shooting him. So, I just basically don't think it was Oswald. The evidence doesn't point to it being Oswald. But Doug is definitely the master of that more than I am.
On you go then, Doug.
Oh no, actually, I'm kind of with you. I'm not as well versed on the details of that as I would like to be. I think that the thing about the Tippett shooting, when you get into the details, if you read Joseph McBride's work, Into the Nightmare, that's a great book on the subject. And that, and on our 22 November Network WordPress site, there was a series written by a guy named Dusty Rhodes
he's the man.
last year on the murder of Tippett. Yeah, this guy... he spent about 2 years sort of looking into the Tippett shooting on his own, and then wrote this series of articles for our over at 22novembernetwork.wordpress.com. And the biggest thing about the Tippett shooting is the timing.
Yeah.
It's the timing. Oswald would not, very simply would not have time to shoot Tippett and walk to the theater by the route that the Warren Commission has him walking to. He just simply didn't have time. You're talking about covering, I can't remember, is it 1.5 miles, Martin, in about 7 minutes?
Yeah, 1.5. Yeah. So he's doing he's
something
doing
like
a sprint.
That's some Rick Grimes cardio right there.
Yeah.
He would have had to have been running. The testimony that the firing pin, here we go again with FBI ballistics expert testimony. The damn pistol had a faulty firing pin. Okay? Oswald had 2 different kinds of ammunition in his pocket. There were shells. Tippett was not shot 5 or 6 times. He had a revolver. He wasn't shot 6 times. And yet, whoever shot him emptied their gun on site, dropping the empty shells next to the body and reloaded. Why would you fire 3 shells, empty the gun, and then empty it of 3 full shells and then reload it? The only reason there should be ejected shells there is, if it were an automatic and ejected the shells as you fired. But no, the Tippett thing doesn't line up at all. And there is so much information to tie Tippett. Tippett may have been an errand boy, an unwitting errand boy in the assassination conspiracy. He had a job. He had 2 part-time jobs. One was at a place called Austin's Barbecue. Well, what was Austin's Barbecue? It was owned by a member of the John Birch Society, the hard right militant organization. They had John Birch Society meetings at Austin's Barbecue, in which both ex-General Edwin A. Walker and Joseph Miltier were known to have attended on at least 2 occasions.
That's insane.
His other part-time job was at a theater, a downtown theater owned by a Mexican named Manuel Avila, who it is known now also ran guns to anti-Castro Cubans in Florida. We know this now. And then you get into, if you look at Tippett's timeline, if you look at his timeline, what he was doing the morning of that, when the assassination was going down and right after that, Oswald originally got on a bus, right? But the bus got kind of mired in traffic when he left the school book depository, and he jumped off of the bus. The first place this bus stop would have stopped was in front of a gas station called a Glauco station, something like that, right over the viaduct going into Oak Cliff. Tippett sat there at that bus stop until the bus went by and didn't stop because nobody was trying to get off at that bus stop. At that point, he beats a trail down to the neighborhood and ends up getting killed. There is a school of thought that Tippett was stalking somebody, that he was told to wait on somebody, that he was stalking Oswald. But, who knows? It's like Martin says, the witness statements are just wrong. I mean, you have 5-6 different descriptions of the murderer. You have 5-6 different descriptions of the timeline. And quite frankly, none of them leave enough possible time between the shooting and his arrest for him to get from the shooting to the theater. But who may have been responsible? Man, I don't know. I just don't think Lee Oswald did it. Again, he's not guilty,
And on that bombshell, that's the movie. That's JFK the movie. We got there eventually, though. So, guys, thank you very much.
Hey, guys, can I read something to you? We started this out with Oswald. Can I read something to you out of one of my favorite books on the assassination?
Go ahead. Go for it.
Would that be cool? Okay, this book it has to do with Oswald. And I thought about this before we did the show. And this goes back to what I was saying about Oswald being not guilty, but not necessarily being innocent. And this book is from a book called The People vs. Lee Harvey Oswald, written by Dr. Walt Brown, a good friend of mine and an absolute scholar on the case, and it was published in 1992 after the Stones movie. I want to read you this paragraph. This is what Walt Brown says, and I agree with him. He says, "And what finally of Oswald? Is this book an attempt to make him the injured party or to give his widow a reason to sue the government for the kind of huge money earned by a mediocre major league shortstop? No, definitely not. The author neither love nor sympathy for one of the title characters in this work. However, the other title character, the people, is of great concern. From Oswald's behavior on the morning of November 22nd, 1963, when he left behind his wedding ring and $180 at the Payne residence, coupled with his somewhat hasty departure from the Texas school book depository. It can be inferred that, if nothing else, he was, as he admitted in captivity, the patsy. If that's true, it means he allowed himself to be the patsy. Let me say that again. If it's true, it means he allowed himself to be the patsy for those who pulled the triggers that were pulled that day. And for that alone, no day in court will ever wash the remaining blood off of his hands. For if he had told the truth of who pulled the triggers, if he had not allowed himself to be the patsy, the history of this nation and the world might be very different. And I agree with him 100%.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of comes across that without Oswald, the cover up wouldn't really be as big. It kind of wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't be so convoluted. Would that be right in saying? Do you think?
He lived. I don't know what your guys' personal beliefs are, but God gave him a chance to come clean.
Yeah.
If you want to look at it like that, he lived to be taken into custody, and he had 48 hours to come clean and to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But he chose not to say a word.
I see what you're saying. Like, not necessarily guilty, but definitely not innocent.
I mean,
yeah, that's kind of my thinking on it.
You look at the time that he was in custody. You've got 11 hours of him being interviewed, and not one. All you've got to show for that is a piece of paper with some handwritten, scrawled notes. But from what I can gather from the way he was quite not arrogant. He's obviously in shock, but he wasn't giving up anything. He was just acting quite almost aloof, I think, at that point when he was in that office, and he still thought he had a way out. And that's my opinion of him in the end.
Yeah, he thought the cavalry was going to ride in and save him. I truly believe he did, and he thought he could get away with not saying anything. It's going to be okay. These guys are going to take care of him. But I think it was at the 11th hour, just a couple of hours before he was shot in that basement, when he reached out to Lieutenant John Hurt in Army Intelligence, when he realized, man, the cavalry's not coming. They're not coming to save me. I'm in neck deep in this. What am I going to do? He wouldn't accept another attorney. He kept insisting he wanted this guy named John Apt, who was infamous nationwide because he spent his entire career defending communists. He played the role to the hilt until he was shot in that basement. He played the role of patsy dutifully and obediently until he was killed in that basement.
That's very strange.
That is very, very strange. That is very strange. I mean, it's all very, very strange, and
I mean, I think that's why movies get made. It's why people are like writing all these books. It is a well established thing that people want to know about, want to read more about.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's a good point. That's why you guys do this. That's why we want to get you guys on the show, because it's something that's personally that's interested me since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's why we did get a lot of positive feedback from the last episode.
I guess the argument can be made that we do this because we don't have lives. I don't know. Maybe heck, it's something else.
That's definitely why we do this. Nobody.
Oh, well, hey, I tell you though, this is 365 Flicks, man. If you want to see another Hollywood adaptation of the Assassination that's pretty spot on, man, look up an old movie called Executive Action.
Yeah, Martin.
Oh, Martin, you told us about that, didn't you?
That movie is.
Martin recommended that in the last part. What I did want to ask though, it wasn't until I was editing the last episode and I was sitting there and I mentioned the movie Parkland. And it got a bit of a knee-jerk reaction out of Doug. What's the crack there, Doug?
He doesn't know what the crack is.
Well, it is. Hey, my buddy Les Warner sent me this thing. He's from England. He's from the UK, and he sent me this thing the other day. I meant to study it, and it was like it's British terms like tosser and stuff like. Yeah, like we say this when we mean this is what it means for Americans. And I meant to study it before I came on with you guys. Les Warner, have you guys ever heard of a band called The Cult?
Cult. No.
Cult? Oh, yeah. Electric. Great album.
Yeah.
I've not, no.
Les used to be the drummer in the Cult.
Of course, yeah.
Anyway, he used to play with Julian Lennon, too. But I digress. He, Dane, I should have known that what's the crack thing is what I'm saying. But it's very much a lone nut Oswald Did It movie. It's very much a Warren Commission apologist. There's nothing to see here, no conspiracy, look away kind of thing.
I mean, when I first watched that movie, because obviously it came out, and like Chris says, we're both quite interested in the subject, so I put it on. There's a lot of really good performances, but it is 100% cut and dry. Oswald Did It, like you say.
Oh yeah, it's going to be one of those movies that, it might be a good movie to watch if you're not into that sort of thing. But if you are into it, on our side, it's just going to be a frustrating thing to watch, whether it's a movie or not. It's just going to be annoying.
I can imagine. The only thing that kept me watching was just the amount of stars
now
that were in it.
Now they're making a movie version of the Stephen King book 11/22/63.
Oh, the series,
which is also an Oswald. But I made this point on my show. It came up. I was interviewing a guy named Chris Gallup. The show that's going to upload in the morning, as a matter of fact. He actually stood on South Knoll and filmed the motorcade that they used when they refilmed the motorcade and recreated it for the Stephen King movie. He went down to Dallas and filmed them filming the movie. And the movie is Oswald Did It Too, but people people automatically took a huge dislike to that book, the Stephen King book, and people on our side of the fence are already firing their shots at it, the movie. But my attitude toward that is a little different because it's a great book.
I thought it was a really good
book.
I thought it was a really good book as well.
Because people don't understand, it's basically a love story told through the prism of the JFK assassination. To me, when I read the book, the love story between the guy time traveling and the girl he meets when he goes back was really the central thesis of the book. And the Kennedy assassination was just a way for that story to be told. And, I kind of made the point where, y'all need to get over yourselves. It's a damn good book. Quit whining, but hey, I digress.
So
on you go, Kev.
I think the executive action. I think I'm going to have a look out for that. I'm going to try and grab that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. I think we should review that.
One more that's really creepy that my wife bought me for Christmas a couple years ago, and again, it's not. It doesn't necessarily have any basis in reality, but it was sort of an independent film here in the United States. I had to order the DVD through Amazon, but it's called Enter with the Assassin. And the plot is there's this out-of-work filmmaker in Miami, and this old guy that lives down the block from him tells him, hey, bring your camera down. Maybe you can interview me. And the guy's like, well, why would I want to interview you? And in the course of the interview, he admits that he was the trigger man on the knoll. The guy doesn't believe him. And it's kind of shot in one of those single camera ways, kind of like that movie Cloverfield, or you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah.
It's kind of shot like that. Like the guy is just everywhere the old man takes him, to show him this or that. He's kind of got the camera going.
Yeah.
And it is a super, super creepy movie. I really enjoyed it. It kind of went under the radar. But anybody interested in the subject, there's not a whole lot of conspiracy fact in it, but it's enjoyable. I liked it.
I'll have a look for that one as well.
Yeah, we'll have a look for that one.
Yeah, definitely. We'll probably we'll pick one of them and probably the executive action, and we'll do a review on that in a future episode. I think
definitely.
That
sounds good to me.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me. So that's.
I'll look forward to hearing it. You know what?
I will do that.
I'm going to go watch that movie again. I haven't seen it in years, man.
So that's JFK, the movie, done and dusted.
Really, though? Is it ever going to be done and dusted?
But we've gone through the movie. Again, we'd like to thank both of you guys for coming on. This has been so interesting again. That just... You could speak for hours on end about this.
I think
thank you very much for having us.
There's that many.
Yeah, man. Thank you. This has been a blast, man. And again, I got to. We need to give shout outs. A shout out and a thank you to Mark Bogner over at Tangent Bound, because that's how we met. Through the Tangent Bound network.
Sure.
Yeah, he's a good man, Mark. He's a good man. I think we keep giving him the odd shout out here and there. What was it you said about your samurai sword? You're ready for the apocalypse now?
Yeah, Mark's got him into prepping.
Are you going to be a prepper?
I'm going to be a prepper. Now that I've got my sword, I'm going to be a prepper. It's rude not to.
So we'll pretty much...
So, there was something else. Real quick before we go, Chris, I thought Face the Raven was okay, but Heaven Sent blew me away. It was absolutely amazing.
You know what? I agree with you. I did kind of well up a little bit when Clara died, or just before she died, when she was telling the doctor not to get angry and what have you.
Come on.
Shut the fuck up.
You're not talking. You're not talking Doctor Who.
We are talking Doctor Who. Shut up.
God's sake.
Yeah, that episode from last night was amazing, especially the scene.
I don't want to spoil it.
Oh, these guys don't watch, especially this one next to me. He doesn't watch Doctor Who.
I told my son about 3/4 of the way through it. I said, "It's the Time Lords. Gallifrey did this to him." I hate to spoiler alert, but he said no. And when he walked out and told the kid, remember that? What was that line? Go to the city, find somebody very important, tell him I'm here and I'm not happy. And then they showed, the Dome City in the background. It just gave me chills.
Oh,
man.
yeah, I can't wait for next week.
Well, Stephen Moffat has made the comment that the Doctor returns to Gallifrey like Clint Eastwood, mad bad bastard. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to next Saturday's episode.
Yeah, so am I. Wow. Doctor
me
Who.
too.
Yeah. Cheers, Martin. I'm glad you're on my side there. I love Doctor Who.
Anyway, yeah, I did enjoy that episode.
How is that show still going?
Because
Jesus,
it's awesome.
He keeps on saying to me, like, every other week, it's like, when are we going to do a Doctor Who? When are we going to do... We even got told, who was it, the Jock and Nerd? They tried to convince us we did a big crossover episode with another Tangent Bound podcast. It was the Jock and Nerd, and they keep on saying, you have to do a Doctor Who episode. I'm not doing Doctor Who.
The fifth of never.
Exactly.
Well, you are doing a Doctor Who episode.
I am not.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Why don't me and you just get together and do a one-off episode and talk a one-off episode of a one-off podcast, and we'll just talk about the Day of the Doctor with John Hurt.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like a plan.
You are more than welcome to that episode.
Yeah, I loved that. That sounds like a plan to me.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Wow.
Ah, shut up.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, Doug, that sounds like a plan to me.
Are you doing a spin-off
We
podcast?
can do it, man. I'm down, baby.
Apparently I am.
Oh, well. You just crack on with your Doctor Who podcast.
You snooze, you lose, Kev.
No worries. I'll interview you and meet you by myself.
You can do that.
Me and Chris are going to interview each other. That's what's going to happen.
Christ, the episode will be about 4 hours long.
Right, so we're gonna wrap up the.
Thank you so much for having.
Oh man,
That's our pleasure, mate.
It's an
That's
absolute
our pleasure.
So
that was episode.
All right, guys, I'm going to go sign off here. I'm going to go sign off here, guys, and go smoke a cigarette. I'm about to die.
You go, man. Enjoy your cigarette.
Good man.
Speak soon, Doug. Take it easy, man.
See ya.
Hey, Martin, you be good. Chris and Kevin at 365, thank you for having Martin and myself and the Dallas Action on your awesome podcast. I am a fan, and I will continue to listen to you guys every time you upload a show, whether I'm on the damn thing or not. How's that?
Thank you very much.
Don't hold.
All right, you guys be good. I'm out of here.
Cheers,
no
man.
worries, pal. No worries.
Bye.
Yeah, just do a little wrap up.
okay.
I can't believe you've been booked for a Doctor Who episode.
I know, that came out of nowhere.
But you know what? I mean, I'm fine with that.
You're not going to do it, are you? So
I'm not going to do it, no. I could not possibly think of a thing to say about that.
Guys, got
bloody
these Doctor
program.
Who episodes. What would you have done if we had interviewed Colin Baker then? Would you have let me do all the speaking?
Yes. I would
You'd
have
have gone
said.
to the bar. You'd have gone to the bar.
I would have went to the bar and I would have phoned it in.
you talk about wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff or something.
Oh my Christ!
So that's been episode 23 of the 365 Flicks podcast. We'd like to say a massive thank you to Doug and Martin.
Yeah.
This has been so interesting. Can't wait to hear it back, and we hope that everybody enjoys it. And good night.
See ya. Bye.